Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we are taking a look at the new Season Pass card, Nebula, and all the various Day 1 decks for her. Got quite a few lists here. Nebula is a very powerful card. She is a 1 cost for 1 power, and her text reads, each turn your opponents do not play a card here, she gains +2 power except the turn that you play this. So Nebula looking like one of the most powerful 1-drops in the game, fairly regularly going to be a 1-3 or a 1-5 if she's played early on in the game. Does have a bit of a downside though, where this is not really a card you're happy about top decking late on in the game, but I think the power she puts out, if you do get her early on, kind of mitigates this downside. So Nebula, super strong looking Season Pass card. Break out those Killmongers, break out those Electras if you're not buying her. But we're going to take a look at all the different decks we have available for her, starting out with a Pool 2 Guardians deck. One of the coolest things about Nebula here is she has a really interesting synergy with some of the Guardians of the Galaxy. For example, in this deck, we're running Rocket Raccoon, we are running Star-Lord and Gamora as well, and the whole idea here is opponents are often going to want to play into our Nebula lane to deny her that +2 power on the turn, and then we can use that to our advantage to get the extra power out of our other Guardians. So I'm curious to see how well this ends up working. We aren't all in on this strategy. We do have Storm as well, who is obviously a very natural, good synergy with Nebula, as once you lock down the Storm lane, Nebula is just going to consistently grow in it, much like the stuff we've experienced with Sunspot in the past being a MVP for the Storm lane. So for the Pool 2 deck here, we just have a lot of powerful cards. Running Angela is another good 2-drop. We're running Guardians of the Galaxy here, so we have Rocket, we have Star-Lord, we have Gamora. We have Armor to protect our Nebula as Star-Lord does, or Killmonger becomes very regular in Pool 2 to deal with all those pesky 1-drops and Zoo decks. We're also running Sunspot as the other premier 1-drop in this deck because of his powerful synergy with Storm. Mr. Fantastic to spread the power around, always extra good with the Storm lane. Jessica, good with Storm as well. Gamora and Spider-Woman for our powerful 5-drops. And then Odin to close out the game, rebuy any powerful on-reveal effects we may have played in the lane, where we're going to play him on the final turn. Moving on to our Pool 3 version of the Guardians of the Galaxy deck, we do have access to a little bit more Guardians here. We kind of putting them all in. We're putting in Groot, we're putting in Drax. I'm not saying these cards are necessarily the most optimal, but they definitely seem fun and pretty powerful with Nebula kind of trying to force your opponent to play into a lane. Otherwise, they're going to fall pretty far behind. Beast is a really cool inclusion in this deck too, as not only does it allow us to rebuy our Guardian effects, but it allows us to put Nebula somewhere else. Obviously, we will not get the +2 that turn, but if the opponent is committing to a lane, or if we just are fine with replaying Nebula in a lane they've already committed in, this seems like a pretty good option, and it's fairly powerful where if we have already gained the battle cry off of something like Rocket Raccoon or Star-Lord, being able to replay them for 1 less mana, keep that bonus stats, and get the bonus stats again, seems like a pretty appealing prospect to me. This is definitely more on the for fun side. I don't think you really want to run as many of the Guardians as you normally would in this kind of deck, but I do think if you want a deck that is playing all the main Guardians of the Galaxy, this might not be a bad direction to try out. It seems like it could be a lot of fun, and maybe it's decently effective versus the kind of ongoing metagame that we're seeing still develop after the recent changes. Next up here, we have an Electro ramp deck. So this is pretty standard to a lot of the Electro ramp decks, though we are doing a little bit different here. We do cut both the Ebony Maw and the Sunspot from this list. Iceman has been making his way into the Electro ramp list for a while now for a bit of disruption, and Nebula seems to be a pretty powerful addition as well, as she can get pretty out of hand and she is really annoying to deal with if the opponent has to also factor in being under a Sandman effect where they can only play 1 card a turn as early as turn 4. So I like this deck a lot. I think the Spider-Woman inclusion is a little bit underrated. Obviously has good synergy with Odin and also dodges Shang-Chi. So I think it's kind of underrated as a good 5-drop. So we have 4 or 5 drops in total, all pretty powerful. Arrow, Spider-Woman, Leech, and Sandman. Leech giving us a little bit of redundancy against the Sarah control type of decks that really don't appreciate getting Sandman. They don't appreciate getting leeched either, and I do expect these decks to become really popular given the fact that Nebula is a 1-drop. So naturally, Killmonger style decks are going to kind of see an uptick. Other than that, we just have some good 6-drops here in Dr. Doom, who's obviously good at spreading the power around and good with Odin. America Chavez, so we draw our ramp earlier on, as well as our stuff like Nebula and Iceman. And we have Magneto as just another good powerful 6-drop that can close out the game and has some nice tech against decks that focus on 3 and 4 cost cards, such as the many Darkhawk decks that are going around right now. Next up here, we have a Thanos Zoo deck. So I think Nebula is going to be a very powerful card in Zoo. And for that reason, we are actually justifying the Electro include in this list. Also a little bit of a lore win here as we are running Thanos with Nebula, so it's kind of a win. We have Bass to pump up all the stats of a bunch of our 1-drops as well as our Thanos stones. And we have cards like Khazar and Blue Marvel to pump up our go wide strategy. We are being kind of cognizant of Killmonger being around, so we are running things like Armor and Cosmo to hopefully prevent the opponent from blowing up our very powerful board. And Angela definitely makes a lot of sense in a shell like this, as we're going to be playing a lot of cards, and with the Thanos Movestone, we have potential to get her to a 4/8 stat without even the Bast buff increase. Another option we have here is Zabu Zoo, so if you don't have Thanos available, this is another interesting direction to take with the Zoo deck. I had a lot of success with a very similar version of this deck, and I would argue that Tempo Shana actually gets improved by the fact that Nebula is getting added to the 1-drop pool, and the fact that we're going to be getting Kitty Pryde as well as Spider-Ham in the next month or two. So I think Tempo Shana is actually going to be getting even more appealing than she currently is, but very similar deck here. We are running a lot of the same 1-drops that we are adding in Ghost, because Ghost is really good with Shang-Chi, allows us to take priority in terms of just having power, winning at least 2 lanes or more, but our Shang-Chi will go off second on the final turn, which is often enough to swing a lane the opponent thinks they're going to win with a powerful card that has 9 or more power. So other than that, we have Armor as a little bit of protection. I'm not usually as big on Armor in the Zoo list, but I do expect a lot of Killmonger around with the release of Nebula. So you probably do want to have Armor here just as a little bit of insurance. We have Khazar to buff up our 1-drops as well as Blue Marvel, and then Shana, not only does she fill out our board, but she can also act as a refill if we do get Killmongered, especially with Ghost. The opponent gets their Killmonger off, we get Shana second, helps us rebuild our board. Definitely a much improved card from the most recent OTA changes, and one you probably want to be considering in a 1-drop focused deck such as this. Next list here, we have another Nebula Thanos list, but this one is taking a bit of a different direction. We are rocking the Zabu Darkhawk package. So we got Korg, we got Rock Slide, we have Darkhawk, and even Mystique. Darkhawk actually been showing up a little bit in Thanos recently, and you know, it's been a very resilient package, and I'm not really surprised to see it in Thanos, which was already having a lot of success. On top of that, we are seeing a little bit of a control-y package here with things like Spider-Man and Professor X to lock down lanes, and Daredevil to help guarantee that, Shang-Chi for a bit of interaction, and Devil Dino, who not only gives us another good Mystique target, but is also fairly big given the fact that we are often cycling our hand with the Thanos stone, so we're not actually going down in cards very often. And the last deck we have here is a Clogged deck. So I do think Nebula obviously has some very powerful synergy with things like Storm. And obviously, if we're going to be clogging up the opponent's lane to where they can't play any more cards in a given lane, Nebula is going to really succeed in that lane because she's just going to keep on growing and growing. So this is the tried and true Clogged list. I've been playing a lot of Nebula is just going in as our flex spot. I've tried a bunch of different cards in this spot, such as Jeff and Stegron, and they've both been good too, but I do think Nebula has a lot of potential here and can kind of help this deck be a little bit more proactive, which I think is a bonus, but really strong, really fun deck, and if you enjoy the Clogged playstyle, this is definitely one you're going to want to check out. Speaking of Nebula, though, we do have a giveaway for the season pass, so that will also be linked in the description. If you want a chance to win the season pass with Nebula and some of these other cool variants and other goodies, you can check that link in the description. Just gotta retweet, like, and comment. Let me know what Guardians of the Galaxy variant is your favorite, and you have a chance to win. We will be drawing the winner on Wednesday night at the daily reset time. But that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.